Welcome to the Make Vegas Pay podcast presented by MVP Consulting. It's Monday, March 6th, and we're going to talk about all the excitement around March Madness, some of our favorite moments of March Madness. We'll dip into the conference tournaments this week, some of the major ones. We'll talk about the selection committee criteria. I feel like it changes every year, and what the hell is a quad one win? And lastly, we'll wrap it up with some general March Madness betting strategies. So before we get into all of that here, just want to talk about my favorite moment about March Madness. And it's got to be one shining moment, that montage at the end. You got every single shining moment throughout the tournament, everything that's been rocking. You get a big dunk here. You get the Cinderella team making huge threes. Hopefully we get a buzzer beater this year. Really looking forward to that. But that one shining moment montage is what I stick around for and I watch every single year. It always takes the cake for me. Sweiss, what are you looking forward to this March Madness?
Yeah, well, the first 2 weeks we get, so many games. It's basically from noon to like midnight on the East Coast. You get great announcers all around. The games are competitive. You have Thursday through Sunday of just a full slate of games. And then the following weekend you do too, just a little more spaced out. And you get to see teams that you never watched all year. So the quantity of games is phenomenal. I have my little break after football and then ready to go for March Madness. But there's nothing like the March Madness tournament. And one shining moment is great at the end as well.
Yeah, and Matt, what about you? What's your favorite part about March Madness?
It's got to be the dogs. MVP, we always talk about underdogs being able to get such good value and risking limited units and being able to bring home so many more. But no, I love underdogs, the Cinderella stories, being from Jersey, watching St. Peter's make their run last year, had the entire state caring about a school that nobody cares about that school over in Jersey City. So, just a Cinderella team that everybody can get behind and just underdogs winning and upsetting. It's, bracket busters. It makes it fun. It makes it exciting. Gets the whole bar going crazy. I love it.
Yeah, can't wait to see a Cinderella team make it far this year. I know St. Peter's was my favorite. You got Florida Gulf Coast, Dunk City a few years ago, and then VCU years back with Shaka Smart, who's now leading Marquette. And they're looking good heading into the tournament here. So let's jump into some of these conference tournaments this week. A lot of big conference tournaments. And I'd say that the best conferences in D1 will have to be the Big 12. That's a juggernaut. Big 10, another juggernaut with Purdue there. ACC is always in the mix there with Virginia and Duke looking good. The Big East, they got UConn coming up. They're a good team with Dan Hurley coaching them. The Pac-12 with UCLA as the one seed there, and the SEC. Every year, these conferences always bring the big guns here. Sweiss, in your opinion, which conferences do you think will have some of the bigger and better teams coming out of it?
Yeah, this is there's a lot of parity this year. I mean, I feel like we're saying that a lot more now, especially with all these like freshman superstars going to the league every year. The Big Ten, I really like them, just having a lot of veterans there. The Big 12 has been very competitive all year. Baylor's been there before. Texas is looking really good. Kansas, obviously, last year was the winner. So those two are, in my opinion, the best two conferences. But last year was pretty well balanced in terms of the conferences, how many of them made the Sweet 16. So expecting that to continue this year. If you look at the top 25, you'll see a few ACC schools. You'll see Gonzaga, St. Mary's. Like there's a lot of parity in this. So Big 12 and Big 10 have been the front runners all year, but doesn't necessarily mean that they have the winner coming out of the tournament. But we'll get into that later.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking at some of these major tournaments right here. Big 12, you got some big names there. Kansas, of course. But Texas this year, they had some coaching changes there that could affect them in the tournament because you want a coach that's been with the team for a while with some upperclassmen. They usually make it far in the tournament. But this year, Texas could be the one to upset Kansas coming into the Big 12 conference as a 2 seed. Some of the conferences that haven't looked as good as they usually do in the past, one being the ACC. They usually have maybe about 6 to 7 teams that make the tournament each year. They're always big names. But this year, I think it's whittled down to about 1 or 2. Thinking about Virginia and Duke, who have recently been looking good and they've been hot. Looking at the SEC as kind of another conference, just like the ACC, they have a good regular season. Alabama has been floating around the top 5 all year, but I feel like they're just falling a little bit short. Kentucky's starting to pick up the pace a little bit. You got Tennessee that has lost a couple of close games there with buzzer beaters, and they're winning a couple of good games, but it's been a lot of back and forth. But then you look at the Big Ten, and you have Purdue, just the juggernaut with Zach Edey in the middle. Again, just a lot of contenders there too. Shout out to the Pac-12 as well. I like UCLA there in Arizona. So again, those are some of the better conferences. You look at the ACC and SEC, you might want to take a short on those. But in your opinion, for everyone here, Slice, will start with you and then go to Matt. But which conference do you think will have the eventual March Madness winner? Did I lose you guys?
Conference. No, you got me. The conference that will have the winner. So I'm basically picking a winner at this point. I'm taking a look right here. This is tough because there's like 2 teams in each one there. You know what? I'm gonna go with the favorite from the American Athletic, Houston. Jim Nance's last NCAA tournament, very sad. Him and Bill Raftery were calling the Houston game the other day. I think he's gonna be following them around. They're a very veteran team, so they're really the only team in the conference that you would consider to win the championship. But I like what I see with the coaching. They have Marcus Sasser and Jamal Shedd as the 2 veterans on their team. They just play really good defense, really lengthy. They were in the Sweet 16 or Elite 8 last year. So like them coming out, like their coaching and veteran leadership and tournament experience, but obviously that can change. And they're the odds-on favorite right now and haven't been tested, quite frankly. But just knowing those things, I'm going to go with Houston for now. That could change next week, but that's what I'm going with for right now.
Yeah, absolutely. You have the American Athletic Conference with Houston, who is the number 1 seed, I guess, and could ultimately be the overall number 1 seed. We'll have to wait for Selection Sunday. Matt, just given the list of conferences here, we've talked about some of the powerhouses. Where do you think the national championship will be coming from, and which conference will that be?
I'm gonna go Pac-12 between UCLA and between Arizona. I think one of those 2 teams gets it done. I've always had a soft spot for the Pac-12. They fill in my late night betting with plenty of 9 p.m. Eastern tip-offs. So it's great for the degenerate in me. So I'm gonna keep it there with the Pac-12. I genuinely think one of those 2 teams could bring it home, especially if they get hot at the right time and make a run.
Yeah, not a bad pick there with the Pac-12. I know Sweiss wanted to go a little controversial there with Houston. Good school in a weaker conference, I'd say, but they have a great chance to win this tournament. They've been in the Final Four before. I'm looking at the Big 12. I'm going to just say it straight and playing there. Kansas is big. Kansas, Texas. And I'm also looking at Texas, not Texas A&M. Who else?
TCU. TCU
Possible
is good.
TCU.
Their coach
jumping in there.
well.
Yeah, so those 3 teams in the mix in the conference tournament, they're all looking good. I mean, that conference has had the most quad 1 wins, I'd say, out of any other conference as well. And we'll talk about that more later, but I think the Big 12 comes out with the winner and the eventual champion. Maybe Kansas can repeat there, but I'm going to lean on Texas a little bit more. One last thing I did want to ask here before we move along, but you're looking at all these conferences. I know Sweiss wants to look at all these teams as a whole, and there's a lot of teams to look at. But when you bet on college basketball, how do you decide on which teams you look to bet on versus the ones that you kind of just pass over?
Yeah, so I mean, right now there's hundreds of teams. I don't even know how many, but there's a lot going on. Once we get to the tournament, we have trends. We have a whole week, not a whole week, but Sunday night through Thursday night to prepare for the games there. So, what do I look for? You said what I look for.
Yeah, just like how do you decide? I mean, there's hundreds of teams, right? How do you decide I want to bet on this game versus another set of games?
Yeah. I I like to go where the data goes. For the conference tournaments, the bigger ones are going to be easier to pull data from. Especially with the coaching from that front. But for March Madness, we'll get into the 8 versus 11 versus 6 or whatever it is. Like those matchups are. So I would say the data of the teams is what I look at the most.
And you'd say that you probably focus on some of the major conferences rather than those smaller conference games, because that's where I assume most of the data comes from, right?
Well, you made a good point, Trace, is that for the conference, the big conferences, and Matt and I saw this weekend, you got unranked teams beating ranked teams like crazy. There's a lot of parity this year, as we've been saying, but also you got to see where the public versus the professionals are betting for those the American Athletic. Other than the big games, the people are probably not public on it, but 12, SEC, ACC, the public is hammering that, so you have to look at the handle data before making a decision. That's why you look towards the bigger conferences, because you're just not going to get that data for the small ones.
Yeah, that's a great point there. And when you're looking at data, how do you find the most value? Does it solely come from live betting, or can you pre-game bet some of these underdogs as well?
Yeah, so we'll be releasing some videos on this, but basically, if you're looking at dogs plus 200, for dogs plus 200, you only need to be right 1 in 3 times, or 33%, to break even, which most bettors I didn't know for a while there. So a little bit, just a stat to note in terms of that. And now I lost my train of thought. So where were we at? Frickin' Zoom.
Yeah, we got a lot of technical difficulties here with the Zoom, some connections. But just talking about how you get the most value, is it just from live betting alone in college basketball? That seems to be a very popular play. Or can you still get value pre-game on some of these dogs?
Oh, you're definitely getting value on these. These. We're going to see some big dogs, especially in the tournament. Plus 500, plus 1,000. St. Peter's last year literally just single-handedly made me a fuckload of money. But for live betting, you more want to get the favorites when they go down, then go back on a run. I remember last year UNC played Baylor in the tournament. That game swung massively. The games will swing. Basketball is a game of runs. So look to take the dog pregame and then hedge live with the favorite if they become a dog. Because if you're getting a dog at let's say you're getting a dog at plus 300, so it'd be risking 100 to win 300. If you just hedge your initial 100, you're still up 200. So that's my philosophy of it. I love to take dogs. Love to get that value, because if you're taking minus 110 spreads consistently, and I've learned this football season, you're competing with Vegas at their own game. And that's why we like live betting, because they don't have time to adjust for handle data or things that happen all week. There could be an injury or foul trouble. College basketball, foul trouble is a big thing to consider. So we don't have the ref stats that we do for the NFL, but you got to monitor foul trouble, and that's why you got to monitor these games live. I'm probably the only one out there that is actually monitoring all these games. Got 5 TVs there to monitor all these games, because if you're paying for a capper that's not doing that, then long term they're just like everybody else, and they're not getting the value and actually monitoring. Let's say Houston, Marcus Sasser, and Shed get injured, they're not winning the game. But if you have a capper who just sends you picks early on and is not monitoring it, and you're out drunk at the bar, what are you going to do? So, yeah.
Yeah, that's how you stay focused. You're going to monitor every game. You mentioned you have the 5 TVs and probably an additional 2 monitors there to watch where the lines are going. But Simon, how do you how do you find the criteria for hedging a game? How do you look at the slate of games and say, oh, this game I should hedge, versus another game where you're like,
Yeah,
I'm probably going to stay away from this one and not risk it?
Yeah, so just to go back on hedging, I know Matt and I have talked about this, but hedging, you're taking the underdog for a hedge game is what we call it, right? To simplify it, you're taking an underdog money line pregame, and you think they're going to win the game. However, if it reaches a hedge point, which that means that the favorite becomes the underdog at plus 100, just to make it easier. So right back to the example, 100 to win 300 on a dog pregame, line shift live, and then you take the favorite at plus 100 to win 100. So you're either up 200 or you don't lose anything. But you have to believe that the underdog's going to win in what we call a hedge game. I know that sometimes people don't understand that. But in terms of like pregame, looking for those teams that fit the criteria for the dogs, going back to like tournament experience. Rest too is going to play a big part in this tournament. I know it's every year, and I didn't realize it till this year. But there's teams that finished up, yesterday, today, 2 days ago, and they have like almost 2 weeks off versus the Big 10, Big 12. These guys are beating the hell out of each other like through Sunday. So that's important to note there.
Yeah, you mentioned it great when you're looking at the criteria for taking a dog. So when you're looking at a hedge game, basically what you're saying is like, hey, this underdog I'm going to take that's at plus odds, I have reason to believe that they're actually going to win this game at some point. And then as they probably will go up early in the game, or that's what you're hoping for at least, so that you could take the favorite at plus odds and kind of hedge that as you're moving forward. Is that correct?
Yeah, so you want them to you believe the dog's going to outright win. You're doing hedging to minimize the risk. And, Vegas is, if you're just taking dogs plus 200, plus 300, Vegas is going to get you. But if you're hedging, or if you're middling where, you do 100 to win, let's say 100 to win 300, and then 175 to win 175, if you're walking away with money either way, you're doing, Vegas. Imagine if you're at a book and you're doing that to Vegas. They're going to be pretty pissed off. It's not like a lot of people are doing this, and people who say hedging is stupid and stuff. Well, there's a reason that Vegas makes a fuckload of money every year and has been in business for so long. If people were doing this, they would not be in business. So that's why we're Make Vegas Pay.
Yeah, making Vegas pay, because from that strategy, it just sounds like there's guaranteed profit, right? And looking at the hedging strategy, when you're hedging in college basketball, what are some things that you're looking to stay away from so that you don't fall into the pitfalls of maybe one team running away with it when you're looking to hedge?
Yeah. Repeat the end of that again.
Yeah, no worries. So when you're looking at hedging, you're looking at a hedging game. Let's say, you put money on the underdog, but the favorite is looking like they're going to run away with it. They haven't got into plus odds yet. How do you take that into account? Are you looking to just live bet another game to get some value? Or are you just saying, like, you know what, the hedge is not going to work here. Let me see if I can get a better live line.
Yeah, I mean, it depends as we get into the tournament, right? You don't want to double down on, let's say we took a money line and then we're like, oh, they're down 10. You have to look at, just like we did in football, right? If you're live betting, you want to look at momentum. So we'll get more into those stats like later next week when I have them. But momentum is huge, right? Like free throw teams are big. So looking into that, if they're missing their free throws early on, it's hard to come back from that. And yeah, those I would say those are the big ones.
Yeah, those are the big ones right then. You're right. Looking at it like it's football, there is some momentum that's involved in that game, but we'll have to just wait and see. I want to go back to the live betting a little bit too. What are some of the important factors about live betting? Like, how do you go into this live betting method so that other people can try to follow you along?
Yeah, so it's tough to do, right, if you're not watching the games, because you could just look at a game on like whatever site you're betting on, and you can't see, the foul trouble or the pace of the game, right? There's certain teams that are going to score a lot of points, and there's others that aren't. If there's a dog that's playing a high scoring team, like a big dog, like a 15, like St. Peter's against Kentucky last year, and the game gets really tight, or it's like low scoring in the first half, you may lean towards St. Peter's there. Obviously, we've mentioned foul trouble, 3-pointers too, if a team is hitting a lot of those. So it's similar in respects to football, but also different. So we'll definitely be looking into the ref stats as well to to see that. But I know there's some, key stats that college basketball looks into. I know I have to look into that a little bit more. But there's a lot there.
Yeah, and I guess one of the other key facets you mentioned is monitoring every single game, which is very tough to do for a lot of people because I'm sure you're watching the March Madness games, you're betting on them. Most of the time, you're going to be out drinking with your buddies and checking out the game and going to the bar. But I know, Sweiss, you'll be in the compound. You got your 5 TVs up. You'll be looking for the best line for your clients and getting them the most value.
I was going to say, Trace, make sure when you're betting on these games, you're on a sports betting platform that you can actually, like, the lines are shifting appropriately in real time. Also, one that, may have the ability to watch the games live. If you're at the bar, it doesn't have it on, or the TV's facing like the other way there. You really need to watch these. And I'll send out alerts and all of that, but and I will be sober during the tournament. So all the games, you can enjoy your time and get, hammered, and I'll send you text alert throughout the day, and then on our exclusive Telegram there. But yeah, live betting is where it's at because Vegas doesn't have the time to adjust. There's only 2 halves here, so halftime's like 20 minutes. So there's definitely some time there to figure out, where you want to go, kind of regroup your thoughts, just like the coaches, right? Like, I'm like, oh, okay. Like Auburn the other day, they were, what were they, Matt? Minus, I don't even know what they were, -1.5, -2. Got to +3.5 at halftime there, had some time to regroup, looked at the stats. So that's big too, right? During halftime, I'll be looking at the stats of the game, even though I'm watching it just to get a little more details, see the foul trouble. I can't have 5 different sounds on TVs, so I can't really keep up, or 4, excuse me. There's like 4 games on at a time the first days. And that's why we're different over here, is because we're actually monitoring them live and putting in the time and getting you guys the best value, especially, if we can get a favorite that goes down and they're +200, +300. So yeah, it's my favorite thing about, betting, is that you can do live betting.
Yeah, and it's MVP's bread and butter, right? So I had a quick question for Matt here in regards to live betting and hedging. I know you've had your hand at it a little bit, but what are your favorite parts about, putting in a live bet or even hedging a game?
Genuinely, the no sweat. I mean, Sweiss is the capper here. I'm more of your average bettor who tails him. But no, I mean, just watching how he does it and spending, some time with him and talking with him on the phone. The no sweat. It last Saturday, Seton Hall was a +8 underdog going in against Xavier. No, against Providence. They played Providence against Providence, and I think they were up at like 22, 24 at half. So it's just stuff like that. I lock in on them pregame, throw half a unit on it, and I can throw a quarter unit on Providence just to cover the hedge. And no matter what, I'm walking out with a few $100 profit. So it just takes all the sweat out of it. It's not worth it. At the end of the day, if your unit size is big enough where sweating it out would get you the extra grand or two, all right, maybe you want to look into it. But not having to sweat out that extra grand or two, that's where that's not my unit size, but that's where I love it. Just being able to casually make some money, watch the game. Like you said, you're going to be out drinking at a bar with my buddies. So if I can pick up a dog, pregame, and I get Simon, or I see it myself, and I can the lines flip and they reach a hedge point and I can lock in profit on it, I know for the rest of the day I'm drinking with my boys for free. Like that. What's better than that?
Yeah, you're paying for the drinks there. And I think, Matt, you bring up a great point too. Personally, I guess in both of your opinions, we'll start with Simon first, but why do you think hedging is so unpopular when on the plus side, it becomes sweat-free and virtually guaranteed profit?
Because you got to do it consistently. I mean, you got to do it consistently. You are digging into your profits, but like, as we were saying, if you can middle and, get the favorite +175 and the dog at +300, like, you're up money either way. That's what you want to be doing long term. People just aren't used to it. I don't think it's a very different. You're taking underdogs, which the public hates to do, and it's not a difficult concept to understand, but it does require you to live bet, which a lot of people don't have patience for. So this is talking about like a long term strategy, like actually having a bankroll that you're looking to basically invest into the March Madness or NFL market. So we're talking about, long term here, not just a one time thing.
Right. And Matt, in your opinion, why do you think people stay away from hedging, aside from all the positive things that it also brings?
Because it cuts into your profits. Like Simon said, being able to win $1,000 or being able to win $400, yeah, it's a $600 difference. And a lot of people will kind of, not want to take that chance. But honestly, you have to get burned by it a few times and you'll never not want to hedge again. I mean, there was Chiefs Chargers Sunday night football, don't know what week, but MVP pumped out Chargers pregame, and they were underdogs, obviously going against Mahomes and Reed. And
Yeah.
I'm sitting there and MVP, I'm talking to Sweiss on the phone. He's sending me text, hammer the Chiefs. They're underdogs. It was, and I didn't do it. I sat there stubborn and I'm watching Justin Herbert, do his thing. Minute left. And what does Patrick Mahomes go down the field and do? He wins. I lose all my money instead of profiting something with the hedge or anything. Just you'll get burned by it a few times and you'll learn your lesson and you'll get over the, oh, I could have won so much more if I didn't hedge. That's just my rule of thumb is the way that I like to look at it.
Yeah, and as Matt was saying, Dre, we can leave it at this. We will send out hedge alerts for our clients and to our Telegram community, but it's ultimately up to them for what they want to do. If they, it's mitigating the risk, right? Like in terms of my unit count, I'm basing this off of what I am betting on. So in terms of my unit count, I'm going to be not losing anything. That's, I can't complain about that. But we'll always send out an alert. So even if you don't want to do it, you can tell us to F off, but we're just providing you the information. Do what you want with it. We suggest hedging, but if you don't want to do it, then you don't want to do it. Can't force you to.
Yeah, you can take a horse to water, but you can't force it to drink. And I think hedging's great. It's not the flashiest type of bet that you're going to win there, but it's a good bankroll builder. It really preaches on some of the fundamentals of what you're looking at. And like you said, people don't have the time to do it all the time, but you do, and that's why you're here to help out your clients and give them that value. Moving along here, let's kind of touch on some of the March Madness and how these teams get selected here. What the selection committee is looking at. And also, what the hell is a quad one win anyway? I've been hearing this all year. I have no clue what it is, and I'm sure some of our listeners are curious as well. So the NCAA selection committee is just made up of a bunch of guys who run the NCAA. They take a look at every single team, hundreds and hundreds of teams, but they used to use the RPI, and they moved it over to the net, which is now the NCAA evaluation tool. They're looking at game results, looking at strength of schedule, location, whether it's home, away, or a neutral site, what the scoring margins are. We're looking at net offensive efficiency and defensive efficiency, and also just taking a look at the overall health of a team. If they're missing a key player, perhaps they're missing a coach, that can move them up and down in the seedings for March Madness. But overall, it comes down to the quality of wins and losses. They have the quadrant system, which they use. They have quad 1, quad 2, quad 3, and quad 4. And it basically classifies each team's wins and losses, whether they're a good win or whether they're a bad loss. So the classification is based on the location of the game, also the teams that are playing. If it's a ranked team playing against an unranked team, if that ranked team loses to that unranked team, that's bad for the better team that's playing. So you have quad 1, which looks at ranked versus ranked, and also location. So it could be home, neutral site, or away. There's a lot of things that are in the mix here, which is why you could get so many good underdog lines in March Madness. It sounds like a complicated process. People are like, what is going on? Does the selection committee, do they even actually watch these games? No, they're just looking at by the numbers. That's how we're able to get these best odds before the games, get them good live during the March Madness tournaments, and then turn that into value. So we kind of covered quad 1. I'm sure you guys were wondering what the hell that was all year, but just some general criteria here. Sweiss, when you're looking to bet on a game, what's some of the general criteria or some of the bigger stats that you look at? I know maybe location, maybe ranked versus unranked, but I'll defer to you.
Yeah, so let me pull up the stats here, or what I look at. I have a lot of things I look at. So tournament experience is one of them, right? Not only with like, I don't know, I saw Memphis the other day. They have a fucking senior that's 26 years old. There's a lot of COVID players. So looking at teams that are more experienced that have been in the tournament, their past tournament success or failures, and coaching, right? Like Kentucky has Calipari. They're ranked like whatever, 23, but they still have coach, Calipari. That's important. Strength of schedule, I would say. The tougher conferences, they get beat up all year. They play each other well. There's a reason more of them get in. So that's important there. Let's see. Yeah, what region they're in. So, like, I know Houston, they'll probably get the 1 seed, so they'll play near where they are. So you kind of get that home field advantage. Last year, Wisconsin got pretty lucky, and they had like a huge home field advantage playing in Milwaukee, or home court. Excuse me. I'm still talking football terms here. But that's pretty important there. And then probably the biggest thing, extended rest for some of these, Cinderellas or big dogs at St. Peter's last year. They had an extra week. So really just keep that in mind when they're playing, these teams. They might start off rusty. That's one thing I'll say. Like if you haven't played in 2 weeks or a week and a half, you might start off rusty, but then come back. So even if you have a dog that's like plus 200, plus 300, if they start off slow, maybe we don't take them pregame, but if we do, just stay patient, stay in the saddle. I know Matt loves staying in the saddle, but this is a tournament where you stay in the saddle. There's more runs in basketball than any other sports. This is the best sport to hedge and live bet. I love the NFL, but it's better for teasers and for other things like that. So yep.
Yeah, you mentioned all the underdogs that have their tournaments early, right? So they're going to end up having maybe 2 weeks of rest, start off slow, get a little rusty there. But then you also have teams in some of those larger conferences that have maybe 3 days of rest, and they're just still in form. They're just going out there and they're winning games, and they jump into the tournament, and they try to win more games to hopefully win a national championship. So with that rest mentioned. But one thing I do want to touch on are the quad one wins here that I keep mentioning. So just some quick stats for everyone that's listening to know. But Kansas leads all teams in quad one wins. The Big 12 have 3 teams with at least 11 quad one wins. And Purdue in the Big 10 leads big teams in quad one wins. So those are some of the teams you should look at there, as well as the Big 12 conference. But gosh, like that's a juggernaut of a conference. If you're the Big 12, I have to play all these great teams, hopefully win that conference. And then 4 days later, I'm having to play a couple tournament games, and hopefully that kind of makes it easier. But Sweiss, I'll defer to you when you look at conference tournaments and that rest period going into the tournament.
Yeah, I was actually going to bring up a different point. I know I've talked about this with Matt, and you can also chime in, Matt, after I wrap up here. But, these teams like Duke and UNC, they play each other twice. If they play each other in the conference tournament, that's 3 times. If they play each other in March Madness, that's a 4th time. If a team has lost 3 in a row to a team, the odds of them losing 4 in a row, especially in March Madness, 2 respectable programs, obviously, if they're there, very difficult to do. And then you have data on, these teams that play each other 2 to 3 times this season. I know Purdue played Indiana twice, both good games there. They may play each other in the conference tournament. So that's what I'm really looking at, because, I'll let Matt chime in, but I don't really see a team like, let's say UNC plays Duke again and they lose. Like, they're really going to lose 4 times them if they played them in the March Madness was an unrealistic situation. They played each other last year because of Coach K and that storyline. But that's my thought on kind of where I'm looking for the conference tournaments, and then how it will come to play for March Madness.
Yeah, no, I think that's honestly a really good point that I don't see too many other cappers talking about. And I mean, of course, I know you, but just as from a general standpoint, if you're tailing anybody else, I know Sweiss will, but obviously make sure that they do still do their capping on that game. Don't just automatically assume they beat them 3 times. Let's take the other team. But no, I genuinely think it's tough enough to beat, to sweep a team twice, 2 times in a season. It's really tough to do it 3, and God forbid you see each other a 4th time. Yeah, I agree. I don't understand how a team would not be able to adjust by then. If you lose 4 times in a row to the same team, they are just genuinely a better team than you are. So I think, no, go ahead.
I was going to say, Trace, we haven't really talked about this, but March Madness is like, yeah, you could have a home court kind of advantage from where the city is, but it's a neutral site, right? There's teams that are really good at home. Like I was watching Memphis, Houston, and Memphis was loud as hell. They're not going to get that in the tournament most likely. So teams, look at their road record. They're not playing at home, so really look at their road record and neutral site record. Even those early season games and those conference tournaments especially. Because I'm throwing home – I don't know about you, Matt and Trace, but I'm throwing home records out the window. Like, that's irrelevant at this point. Look away and neutral site, but it's a different than the NFL where there's, like, not home field advantage. So it's interesting. But just wanted to point out for all the MVPs listening there. That's an important thing to note.
Yeah, that's huge because depending on where they're placed in the tournament, which region, that could really determine what kind of fan bases show up. I know a couple of fan bases that travel pretty well, depending if they make the tournament, but I know Michigan State in the past, they have a pretty good traveling fan base there. I'm sure Kansas does a good job with their fans. We could look not so much at maybe those Pac-12 teams. They don't travel well, but
UCLA.
All right, yeah, maybe a little bit of UCLA. I'd say a little bit, but those Pac-12s typically stay in the West region because California is just such a big state.
I'm gonna cut you. I hate to cut you off, but last year I was watching Arizona in the tournament, and they're chanting "U of A." Like they were getting hyped, dude. Those they care about Arizona basketball. They're in Tucson, Arizona, bro. They don't have another team in town there, so that's all they got. So don't sleep on these Pac-12 teams. We'll revisit this in a couple weeks here.
All right, I'm not sleeping on the teams. They're good teams. I'm sleeping on the fan bases. So you've heard it here first. I'm sleeping on those fan bases. But one fan base that will have fans everywhere is Duke. Duke travels well. They're going to have fans everywhere else, even if they're fake fans. it really doesn't matter. And then you're looking at other teams here. I think the SEC fans travel really well. You've seen it for football. You might even see it for basketball this year.
God damn Alabama. Please don't win another championship. Nobody wants to see these guys fucking win. It's unbelievable that they win so much already. They get the Brandon Miller, who's an unbelievable freshman, but we'll talk a little bit more about them later on here.
Yeah, we'll get into that in just a second. Moving on to the next topic we have are just some general betting strategies for not only college basketball, but for conference tournaments, for the March Madness tournaments in total. I know, Sweiss, you mentioned a couple of them before, but some of the big ones that we look in terms of March Madness, it comes down to those experienced teams and coaches. You have a coach that really set up a system there, recruits well, tight with the players, has upperclassmen. You're thinking more so of a Virginia there with Tony Bennett. He's been there for a couple of years, really set the program, and he has those kids staying for about maybe 3 to 4 years every time they come out as good draft picks. The next thing you mentioned too was also the strength of schedule. If you're playing hard teams during the season, you're damn sure going to see them again in March Madness, in the tournament. You're going to see some different teams there. If you can't even beat your own conference, don't even bother trying to beat other conferences if you're in one of those smaller ones. And another thing to mention here, just the signs of a Cinderella team. You want the most bang for your buck. Like last year, St. Peter's made so many people so much money. Just keep an eye on those teams.
I remember watching with you.
Yeah, it's going to be a tiny team from out of nowhere. You won't expect them, but there's going to be one kid who's a filthy three-point shooter, and they're going to have someone who could really rebound and dunk the ball. So that's your Cinderella formula right there. And then a coach who could really make some headlines as well. And then the last thing here, and I think most importantly, and I'll defer to you after I finish this, but those live betting opportunities. You really got to know these teams. March Madness and these conference tournaments are full of wild swings that I know Sweiss has seen for years. So Sweiss, let's touch on this, on the live betting opportunities, and also what to look for and some tips for betting this March Madness.
Yeah. So real quick, speaking of like those, the little guy, as Bill Raftery will say, but Oral Roberts, if they make it, Max Ambrose, I think he's on the Wood Watch. He was in the tournament like 2 years ago. I think they won like 2 games there, but there's just little guys like that to consider. The biggest thing, I think, the number one tip for March Madness, even more so than the NFL regular season, is bet against the public and bet with the house. You got to bet contrarian. This is one of the biggest bet events. The public is not going to think that dogs are going to win. So starting there, like really look where the handle data is going. I know we use VSiN for handle data. We think they're the most accurate. I've looked at Action Network, not a huge fan of it, but really got to look into that and see how the lines shift and move there. So that's important there. And then in regards to the live betting, I'm going to really do a deep dive into the different trends and is a certain team a first half or second half team. I know we did that with the NFL, but similar concepts apply for March Madness here. So I would say those are two of the bigger ones.
Yeah, and one thing I did want to mention too, which is a great tip, but also do some line shopping. Look at different books. Look to see what they have posted. You might get a better line on one book than you do on the other. You might see FanDuel might have some team, might have a team at better odds than they do on DraftKings. So, Sweiss, maybe expand on that a little bit in kind of your experience of line shopping and what's the best way to do it.
Yeah, so great question, Drace. I mean, you really don't want to be on just one book. Like I personally, FanDuel I think is the best out there, but there's different lines everywhere. There's different types of bets. Live lines are completely different. I've seen, from a plus 110 all the way to plus 170 in the same game. That's a lot more value you can get there. So you should probably be on, I'm on like 4 to 5 different sports betting platforms, but you should minimally be on 2, probably 3. I don't understand why people don't like being on multiple of them if there's some weird reason. But Matt, what do you think? Why do you think people are only on one, sports betting platform?
I think it genuinely goes to a comfort thing. People are comfortable with the platform that they use, whether it be legal, whether it be illegal, offshore, whatever you want to say. But they get comfortable on one and they don't want to leave. I know a lot of people worry about on offshores, the not being able to stop themselves because betting with a credit limit is not, you're not depositing your own money. However, a bunch of these books, they offer ways that you can deposit. It's the exact same as FanDuel or DraftKings. If you only want to risk $500 the entire March Madness tournament, you send $500 to whoever you're communicating with, and that's what you're going to have to play with. It's not just like you automatically start out with $10,000 credit and you got to hope you don't go down. But yeah, I think it comes down to a comfort thing. I really don't see any other reason as to why not. It only makes sense to be on multiple. Like you guys said, you get to line shop, get to look for the absolute best value that you can get a team at. There are countless times that you'll see someone have them at minus 110, and another book has them at minus 130, minus 140. And that's a lot of value that you're missing out on, depending on which book you're on.
Yeah,
and
that's a great point. Go ahead, Simon.
Yeah, I was just going to bring this real quick in terms of going back to your question, Trace, about the live betting and the value there. So how are our unit scales going to work real quick for March Madness is we're looking to do for pregame dogs, the maximum we can bet is 2 units on that. So you have the ability to hedge there. So it's like 2 to win 4, but you hedge 2 to win 2, so you're only up 2 units there. Then for the live bets, as of right now, maybe it will shift to 2 units if I get greedy, but 1.5 units on a lot of those bets, and then 1 unit maximum on an over/under play, or like one of those -4 spreads. We'll see. Maybe the like -4 or -10. We'll decide on a number that it has to be below for it to be 1.5 units, and then 0.5 units is still a play we like, but it's the least value there. So the spread would be -110, or the bet would be -110 odds. And yeah, I mean, we like the bet, but it's not, it's like, yeah, it's half of, if I have an over under, my max bet is 1 unit on that. I'm really confident in that. Not saying I'm not confident in the half, but it's just, appropriate unit sizing. You're not going to have every bet weighed the same. So I just wanted to bring that up real quick about unit sizing for the tournament, because we'll be sticking to that pretty strictly.
Yeah, with so many games, there's also a lot of risk involved too. So you're really mitigating that risk by unit sizing appropriately, making sure that you can make it through the whole month of March and not just throwing it all on that one Cinderella team that maybe could win you a lot or maybe could lose you a lot there too. Well, that's why you hedge, I guess. One thing I did want to mention here in terms of like bracketology and like you have all these experts, right? You got all the experts saying that this team's better than that team or etc. But, in your opinion, and we'll start with you, but like, in terms of watching college basketball, like how often do you want to rely on these experts and how often should you rely on your gut?
Yeah. So, I mean, the experts are like, I don't know who they're paid by or whatnot, but they're like giving, they're not even giving you dogs. Okay. They're just saying, dogs are going to cover. They're not saying dogs are going to win. They're very afraid for some reason to do that. They're taking minus 110 spreads. So like they could have, the first weekend of March Madness, their worst time betting ever, and just like lose you a ton of money and units because they're taking minus 110 spreads and not having the ability to hedge, not having the ability to take plus odds. At plus 300, you only got to be right 1-4 to break even, and it keeps going on from there. But we got back to the plus 200 there. But yeah, sometimes you got to go with your gut. I can't personally. I mean, Syracuse. I went to Syracuse. They're not going to be in the tournament unless they somehow win the ACC tournament. But sometimes you got to go with your gut. I mean, I'd love to hear Matt's opinion. I'm sure he's gone with his gut a million times. But for me, if it's a difficult, decision, yeah, I'll throw a little bit of gut in there. But it's mostly data analytics and try not to have a bias.
Yeah, Matt, do you listen to like Joe Lenardi? Are you listening to Ken Palm? Or are you listening to your cousin?
So here's my take. The experts that you see on TV and these analysts, they're not cappers, and when they pick who they're going to win before the game, you always see it's a classic meme. All the entire team, the whole Fox team picks this team to win, and the underdog wins. Look, I'll put it this way: your best cappers, right? Your absolute best are hitting high 60s, maybe the best cappers are hitting 70%.
Low 60s, bro.
What's up?
Low 60s, I would say.
For your absolute best capper?
Yeah.
Okay. So
legitimate.
Your top dog cappers are hitting low 60s. So even they are gonna be wrong. Yes, I'm gonna tail cappers. I'm gonna tail Sweiss. I'm gonna tail the guys that really do put in the time. But at the end of the day, my birthday is March 16th. So last year I turned 21 on opening day of the tournament. And let me tell you, I'm ripping Red Bull vodkas, watching St. Mary's cover, and I'm throwing around my free play on FanDuel and DraftKings, because it was free play, throwing around like there's no tomorrow. And I wake up 3 days into the tournament and I'm up $800, and I have no clue what the hell I was doing. So, I'm not saying to do that. I'm obviously telling you, hail the guys that do the time and do their research. But at the end of the day, the best of the best are still hitting only at low 60%. Vegas will always win. It's just the bottom line.
No, that's why we live bet, Matt. And another thing,
absolutely.
I mentioned Nance and Raftery. Those are my guys. They just get me amped. But I've talked about it for NFL, right? Like the reason that I like watching, in addition to the 5 TVs from home and in the compound, is that I can hear what the announcers are saying, because I'm not a basketball expert in terms of the X's and O's. I've never been a coach. I played. But you'll get some really good analysis. There's some great announcers out there. So those guys are, definitely the experts, and they're just telling you, how the game flow is. They know a lot about these teams. So I think that's an important thing to note that I'm monitoring too, right? I can't do it for 4 games at one time, but for the game that I do have on, I think it's important.
Yeah, and I would say that's the most important game that you're monitoring. It's not like you're, overlooking the other games. It's just this game seems to be the most important that you have the sound on. But speaking of, kind of doing your own research and getting down and dirty, I did some research myself. let's kind of go into some of these conference lanes, maybe some teams to look for in the next 2 weeks as we go into the conference tournaments, Selection Sunday, and the first and second rounds here. The three teams I'm keeping my eyes on are going to be Indiana, UConn, and Texas. So with Indiana, I mean, there's a lot of value to get from this Indiana team. They're the 3 seed in the Big Ten Conference. I mean, you got Purdue, who's going to be the juggernaut there with Zach Edey. And I know everyone's talking about Zach Edey. Oh, he's so good, player of the year, this, but it only takes 5 fouls for you to have a nightmare tournament game. It only takes 5 fouls there. So I think there's a lot of value behind Indiana. Aside from Purdue, they're at plus 160 odds to win the Big Ten. Indiana's at plus 550, and that's the second, I guess, lowest there you'd mentioned. I think there's a lot of value in Indiana. Don't sleep on them. The next team I'm looking at is UConn coming out of the Big East. I don't know what Dan Hurley's putting in the water there, but it's pretty damn good. Connecticut, they're a 4 seed. You got a stacked conference with Marquette, Xavier. These teams that have had those coaches there and some of those upperclassmen, they're going to be playing in Madison Square Garden, and you know they love the bright lights of New York. But if you're looking at UConn, they're the 4 seed, but they're at plus 200 odds. They're the odds-on favorite to win that tournament as a 4 seed, which is just crazy to me. So keep an eye on that. Lots of value there. Make sure you take them early, or else that value is going to whittle round after round in these conference tournaments. Maybe you'll get some great value going into March Madness. And then the last team here to talk about is Texas. Hook 'em. They beat Kansas, I believe, this week. Kansas going in there as the number 1 seed. I think we'll see a 1 versus 2 here in the Big 12. Don't miss this conference tournament. I think it's going to be the best. Texas has the second best odds at plus 330, right behind the Kansas Jayhawks at plus 300. If you see Kansas and Texas in that final or in that championship game for the Big 12, it's going to be a pick 'em. It's going to be close. Look to live bet that game and possibly hedge as well. So those are my 3 teams to look at. Sweiss, let's go over to you. What are your teams that you're looking at?
Yeah, I mean, one of them I want to include it on this list, I guess, because you already mentioned it, but Indiana, Trace Jackson Davis putting up ridiculous numbers there. He's a senior. They have another kid that's, I believe he's going to the NBA with a kind of 2 last name things like Trace Jackson Davis. Blanking on the name right now, but like them. Also, I think Purdue's a little bit fraudulent. Zach Edey, they freaking lost to St. Peter's. We watched that game together. You know, he's not a good NBA prospect. He can get in foul trouble. I don't like Purdue going far. I'm going to say it right now. I don't like Purdue going far in their conference tournament. I don't like them going far in the NCAA tournament. They also, their best player, what was his name? Ivy went to the league last year. The freshman kid that was pretty nasty. But going on to my teams here, Kentucky, obviously, Coach Calipari, fantastic. They're always really good in the tournament. They have a big man, Oscar Tshiebwe. He's fantastic. They've also, SEC's been good, so they played a tough schedule. I like them to go pretty far in this conference tournament here. They still are fighting for some seeding there. I already put Purdue on this list. Alabama, Brandon Miller, Nate Oates. Watched them the other day actually lose, but they're a really solid team. And then I know Matt's going to get into more Houston, but I just, after watching Houston, Jamal Shedd hit a buzzer beater the other day, and Nance and Raftery calling it, and just the way they play, I think they're going to run away with their tournament. If they could play Memphis again, I'd love to see that. But yeah, always on Houston. But we'll see what Matt has to say.
Yeah, no, I think my big 3 are going to be Houston, UCLA, and Kansas coming out of their conferences. Genuinely Houston. Yeah, they do play in a weaker conference. We're not gonna lie about that. But I genuinely do think that we talk about coaching and we talk about having experience in the tournament, and I just think Kelvin Sampson over there with Houston is really going to do a good job of getting the boys ready. I think I saw something on Twitter. Both of their losses this season have come by, I want to say, combined 7 points, something crazy like that. So, they're in every game they play if they're not winning them. And I think just with the level of conference that they're in, they're going to be able to get out of it. For UCLA, I again, going back to experience, I just think their experience. I know they have a lot of returning guys on that team with uh, just all the players that I really think they'll be able to make a run at it. And if they can get hot at the right time, I don't see why they can't come out of the Pac-12 over there. And the Big 12's tough. They're the juggernaut conference, but I could see Kansas or Texas, and I know even Sweiss. You said earlier TCU, even they could make a run, and I think they're coming into the conference odds at plus 900. But if I had to pick one out of the Big 12, I'm going to go with Kansas. Just I know it's going to be tough for them to repeat the national championship, but I think they could. I think they could come out of the conference tournament themselves and just really.
I'm going to go with Baylor. I'm going to go with Baylor.
Baylor, okay.
I like the way they play, and they're coached well. They have a lot of veterans there. But going back to your point about UCLA, remember they were in the Final Four versus Gonzaga, that crazy game in 2021. Jaime Jaquez, whatever the hell his name is, and Tiger Campbell were both, they're still playing. They were on that team getting big minutes. So UCLA definitely has the experience there. Another team that I really like in their conference tournament, and I'm guessing you guys will agree with this, but they're on the bubble. I think they're out of the tournament right now, but UNC could go on a run in their conference tournament. Just put it together. What do you guys think?
Yeah, look, you got UNC who's on the bubble. Of course, they were the runner-up in the national championship last year. They have a ton of returning starters. In Armando Bacot recently passed Michael Jordan in all-time double-doubles. But, I mean, you look at the ACC conference, it's not as powerful as it was in past years. They can make a run, but they have to make the run if they want to get into the tournament. We're kind of low on time here, but one of the last things I wanted to mention, I think these are all great teams to look at, especially Houston. The whole theory with Houston here is that it's Jim Nance's last year calling March Madness. Jim Nance is also an alumnus of Houston, and the national championship game will be played in Houston. So keep an eye on that. And one last thing I do want to mention here, and I think every year in the tournament, it's like the most marketable thing, but players' names, right? Jaime Jaquez Jr., that's a marketable name. You got Serge Jabari Rice from Texas. You got Zach Edey at Purdue. You get these crazy names, and it's pretty marketable. Those teams tend to go on runs with the cooler names. You had Dougie Dirt last year. You had a lot of fun names to play with.
I remember on Iowa State or years ago, Ali Farouk-Manesh, very good player. Had a great game when they upset somebody. But yeah, the names are going to be crazy. I'm interested, Drace, your opinion on Bill Raftery's last time with Jim Nance. I don't know if he's going to come back, but how many onions are we getting in and lingerie on the deck and all of that this tournament?
Well, I hope we get a lot, because we're going to have to find out next week at Selection Sunday, where we will talk about this next week and get into March Madness. But that covers episode 7 of the Make Vegas Pay podcast, talking all March Madness and conference tournaments this week. If you enjoyed this and want more, subscribe to our YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter with the Make Vegas Pay handle. Throw us a like on the video below, and thank you so much for listening. Enjoy March Madness and the rest of the conference tournaments. We'll see you guys next week.